It is time for today's tough question. I know what Caleb's going to say here, and I love him. I think he's incredible, but he's going to be absolutely wrong. And this actually is brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
Max Chadwick picked 2 games on his 10 must-watch games of 2023. Guess which ones they were? University of Texas, San Antonio, and Austin Peay. That's who they were. No, they weren't. They were Tennessee, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, as you would expect. Which game's more important? And it's brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Best prices, best service in the biz. You've got to get to Andy Mason for all of your real estate needs. AndyMasonRealEstate.com. All right, today's tough question is a little bit different based off what we're discussing of the must-watch games. And it is this. Which would be the bigger win for the Vols? At Tuscaloosa, Georgia at Neyland Stadium. I want to point out that as bizarre as it was, correct me on my numbers if I'm wrong, Caleb, last week, Tennessee had a 15.8% chance of winning at Tuscaloosa and a 48% chance, if I remember correctly, maybe 47.5, of beating Georgia at home. So according to Pro Football Index, which ain't Vegas, Vegas is number 1 when it calls these shots, by the way. You need to be sure and check out Zen Sports, download their app today because it's phenomenal. You'll get more money back than you could ever imagine. That surprised me. So what's the bigger win for Tennessee's program in 2024? Is it winning at Tuscaloosa or is it beating the big bad wolf, which is Georgia in Neyland Stadium?
This isn't a debate. It's beating Georgia.
Absolutely, absolutely wrong.
No, I look, I am a history major. I love history. Feelings don't feelings and thoughts about history don't matter. One could win you the SEC East. Championships come first. Rivalry wins come second. Dave, Tennessee beat Florida, Georgia, and Alabama in 2004. They lost to Florida in 1997. But I guarantee you, everybody refers the 97 team to the 04 team. Why? Because they won the SEC championship. Championships are number 1. That's the number 1 priority is championships. Then record against rivals is number 2 in the level of rivals. Georgia is for the SEC East. Alabama is for pride. Actual titles over pride every day of the week.
It's Alabama.
You're on crack. You're wrong. You're just flat out wrong.
Only on the weekends. No, it's Alabama. And here's why.
You're on some method growing Alabama is what you are.
Here's what it is. I'm on that Alabama crack, which is get you all gidgety. Listen, it's Alabama because you could potentially start something in their heads because they're saying right now, their players, to a man, they're saying, man, got lucky. That dude should have hit that field goal and we would have won and it wouldn't have even been a factor and they wouldn't have got a shot. And, we were down a little bit in the skill position players, but we're going to show them what. And that's going to be a motivation game for them. And you go in and beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. What could you start? So you could start something that has happened in this series before. Finish this sentence, Caleb. This is the Tennessee-Alabama game. The series is a series of blank.
Oh, it's definitely a series of streaks. History shows that. You are right.
Right. You could start a streak against Alabama like when Peyton Manning did so in the 90s, where they're not as worrisome. And Nick Saban is going to retire eventually. You imagine if you could have 10 straight wins over Alabama, and then you suddenly focus a little bit more on Georgia, who I think that Tennessee can catch, but I don't think they're ready to this year. So maybe I'm taking a little bit of reality into it and that I don't think they'll beat Georgia this year. I don't think they're quite ready. But if you beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, that is a statement win. You could have some fluky win at Neyland Stadium and beat Georgia, get fortunate, but that's different than beating Alabama twice. Plus, you would beat Alabama in a season in which they're desperate, too strong a word, but in the neighborhood. They're going to more of a ball control, pro-style offense like they had pre-Lane Kiffin. You go down there and beat them at Tuscaloosa. That will result in recruiting wins. If you fluke out and beat Georgia somehow at Neyland Stadium, Caleb, that is awesome, cool, might get you a prospect or two, but the way they're going to spin it at Georgia, we're still getting ready. We're still getting used to Carson Beck. We're still doing all this thing, and we made a couple of mistakes, but that's an aberration. You beat Alabama twice. That ain't no aberration. You're winning more Arian Carter recruiting battles. I'm going to tell you right now, I love you like a brother, but it is, no doubt, beating Alabama 2 years in a row would be monstrous. That is the best program in our generation's history and arguably the best program in the history of college football. You beat them twice. Huge.
This is where the difference for all the listeners, I want you guys to understand this. This is where, and I cover recruiting, but I haven't covered it as well as Dave has. And Dave he's putting the top 10 games, must-watch games of the season on here.
Lucky you, by the way, you haven't covered recruiting as close as I
yes.
have. Gary says I'm 100% wrong on this one.
1,000% wrong is what he said.
1,000.
People who are so deep in the weeds covering recruiting sometimes, they focus too hard on recruiting and not what the point of recruiting is, which is to win on the field.
There have been times in my career I have definitely been guilty of that. I will give you that.
Yes. Winning on the field still takes precedent for the most part. And if you beat Georgia, you win the East. And Dave, a national championship is on the horizon if you beat Georgia. A possible national title. And the focus should always be on the possible national title.
Whoa. With the college football playoff, you can't say that. Because they could lose either one of those games, win the other, and still be the fourth team in the playoff.
Yes, that's true, but it could be if they lose to Alabama, that is true. They could lose either and not the other and still be the fourth team. That's a very good point, but it's a much better situation for them. The likelihood increases a lot. I think that Tennessee, the goal is always championships, and the first step is the East. And this will change next year. Next year, you're right. This year, it's Georgia. The first step is winning the East. And Tennessee needs to win. Tennessee winning the East always takes precedent. Dave, what you're doing, and I see NFL teams do this all the time, by the way. The NFL team that says, I don't want this quarterback that I know is a sure commodity because I'd rather have this young guy that I think I can have longer down the road. And then they always go to regret it. The only one that didn't regret it was the Packers with Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. But Dave, most of the time, you know this. When elite quarterbacks are on the market and you see GM say, I don't want that elite quarterback because I'll only have him for 5 years and I'd rather have my drafted quarterback for 15. No, take the 5 years. It's a win now league. College football is a win now sport. And when you got the chance to win, you take it. Always. And so that's where I am of the mindset that Georgia is still more important. And by the way, Georgia is a fertile recruiting ground for Tennessee on its own. And if Tennessee does beat Georgia, I don't even care if it's fluky. They could go to recruits and say, look at what Josh Heupel's building. Look at what he's done in 3 years now. I think that would help them more in recruiting than you're giving it credit for.
All right. Well, Caleb's dead wrong, but he's trying hard.
Nope. I'm totally right.
Out of these top 10 games, how crazy is it that Tennessee is in 2 of them? Would they have been in even one of them last year because they were expected to win 8 games? So they wouldn't have been. They wouldn't have been on this list at all. So the ones that you would go out of your way for, and it's on the screen, but if you can't see it you're on our audio platform, the top 10 games in college football this season per Chadwick, is he on 3, I believe?
No, Pro Football Focus.
Pro Football Focus. Ohio State at Michigan, LSU at Florida State, LSU at Alabama, Michigan at Penn State, Florida State at Clemson, Penn State at Ohio State, Georgia at Tennessee, Texas at Alabama, Tennessee at Alabama, Ohio State at Notre Dame. Give me the one game on this list that you would miss your brother's wedding for, and give me the one game on this list that you might just go have a cup of coffee and it's on in the background with the sound down.
Okay, the one I would miss my brother's.
The one you care most and least about.
The one I'd miss my brother's wedding for. Since we cover Tennessee, I'm going to say Tennessee games notwithstanding. To be fair,
okay, let's take those. That's a good idea. Let's take those out.
It's Ohio State, Michigan, and it's because those are the clear-cut top two teams in the Big Ten right now, still, and that everything is riding on that. It's between that and LSU, Alabama. It's between those two because those are like, God, I'd love. Can I go to both of those? I'd miss my brother's wedding for both of those games. I'm sorry.
I'm an only child, but I would miss my brother's wedding for LSU at Alabama, taking the Tennessee games out. The one that just doesn't do a lot for me at all would be two teams, one of which you think's overrated and one of which you think is not, I believe. Michigan at Penn State. I think Michigan's a step better than Penn State significantly. So that doesn't do a lot for me. I don't think that's going to be close. I think that's going to be a pounding like 24 to 13 game. That's never really close, those type of games. And Florida State at Clemson really does nothing for me because I'm with you. I think Florida State's massively overrated. So the one that I would absolutely have to see and want to see and skip my brother's wedding as an only child, encourage my mom not to have any more kids, but she's 74, so that's not going to happen, would be LSU at Alabama. That's the one.
Dave, I got 4 games I would skip on this, honestly. I'm not going to lie to you. So
what are you doing this football season?
Okay, LSU, Florida State. The only reason I would watch that game significantly is because I'm putting so much money on LSU to cover whatever the spread is that I got a lot of money riding on that game. But that will be a bloodbath in LSU's favor, guys. When we start our gambling coverage during football season, I'm saying it ahead of time. LSU will cover whatever the spread is against Florida State. I'm with you, Florida State, Clemson. I really don't care to see that one. I would actually see Michigan, Penn State. I don't really care to see Penn State, Ohio State, because I think with the Big Ten, and I don't know if you agree with me, Dave, on this, but I think home field advantage is a factor in the Big Ten because it's so much more a slave to the elements, if that makes sense. So I think but
Michigan would play in the same elements as Penn State. Let's say it's a snowy day.
I think elements favor the home team no matter what, though. Even if you're used to those elements, I think I think with the crowd noise and the elements, it can kind of distract offense trying to get things going. And so I'm interested in that. The one that I think we both agree, though, neither one of us would watch, Ohio State, Notre Dame. I don't care that's at Notre Dame. I'm not watching that.
Yeah, that's going to be a slow descent into being irrelevant with Notre Dame. Just go ahead and promise you. That is exactly where that's going.
Yep. I totally agree.
You and I think so for two different reasons. You think so because of the academic standards and the discipline rules. By the way, I've said it before, but if you don't know, Notre Dame is the only school that is relevant in football that does not allow its coaches to have any input on eligibility or discipline. That's why Brian Kelly's the heck out of there. Okay, so I think that's one of the reasons I believe Caleb believes it's going to be a slow descent. I also believe with the Freeman guy that they hired as coach, he's a player's coach from what I'm told, and they played hard for him last year. But players' coaches, what happens, Caleb, invariably? They always kind of lose their team. And it happens over a year or two. I call it the Barry Switzer effect. Barry Switzer in 1994, 1995, the Dallas Cowboys were still the best team in the NFL. 94, they didn't win a Super Bowl. 95, they lucked out and beat the Steelers. They shouldn't have beat that team. That was a better team. But they beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl. But that just, the erosion of the player's coach. And you can never go back. If you're Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, you can never go back and say, I got your attention now. You can go the other way. You can be Nick Saban and lighten up a little bit, but you can't go the other direction. And I think that's what Butch Jones tried to do. I think he was a player's coach, and then I think he tried to be the tough guy coach, and he ended up just showing his sociopathic ways, which you don't want.